So, welcome, Sondra, to my podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. As I mentioned to you, I started this podcast to hear about stories from families who are caring for a loved one, who have cared for a loved one, or even those who are an older adult, their experience navigating the healthcare system, legal issues you may experience, and sort of financial challenges. And really, just to sort of bring to light some of these factors or experiences that we may have, and then also provide some sort of solutions that the listeners can really take with them and then hopefully improve the way they either handle healthcare or while caring for an elderly loved one. So, shall we begin?
Certainly.
Okay, so please share with me a little bit about yourself, like your age, race, education, and occupation.
Well, I'm a single white female, senior, 71, and I was in the hotel management field for about 30 years. I'm retired and worked some other interesting jobs, but now retired. I took care of I was so lucky to have my parents and my mother especially till almost 90. And but she was not well.
Okay.
So that made me a candidate for being a caregiver. And so that's what I took on gladly to take care of my mom. But I had to learn a lot because she wasn't well.
Uh-huh.
And already in her 80s, it was a challenge trying to communicate with her doctors and seeing if she was taking her medicines right. But a lot depends on how your parent, what their overall health is. So for someone that has conditions, I thought, I'll just meet her doctors and then try to make sure she's following what they say. And that was all well and good. But then eventually she had a fall. A lot of older people fall.
Uh-huh.
She had a rupture in her spine and was in a rehab situation for quite a while. And even getting her the care from that fall was not easy. Okay. She may have spent the rest of her life paralyzed had we not persisted to get answers about what specifically had happened to her when she fell. And after pushing through the system, finding the right specialist, we did find, but then she had to be in rehab for 100 days. The most Medicare would allow. But I knew she could rehab back from that injury. She got wheeled into that rehab on a stretcher and walked out with a cane.
Wow.
I'll never forget it.
That's terrific.
And they were ready to boot her out after 14 days, saying, okay, we gave her rehab, let her go back home or go over to nursing, because they were like ready to put her into a box. You know? And I said, no, I know my mother. You have to push her harder. And that's when I learned that as long as you show improvement, Medicare's on your side. And they continue to renew her stay at the rehab, and renewed it each and every time, because I would meet with the physical therapist. I would have to meet with the head nurse and the social worker to make sure that they were pushing my mom to keep improving.
So, Sondra, I'm hearing that you had to sort of establish a team of care for her, right? So I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah. If left to the system would have given her 14 days of rehab and sent her back home.
And because you established this team and you communicated with them, then that would it allowed you to sort of advocate for her and extend her time to get more.
I knew that wasn't. I mean, if I didn't think she could improve more, I wouldn't have done it. But I knew my mom. I mean, most kids know their parents or could have those conversations. And if the person evaluating her just writes the report, they've completed their 14 days and they don't see any improvement anymore, nobody fights for you, then they release you. After 14 days.
That's a really interesting point, because I found, even for myself, having to navigate and advocate for my own health conditions, that the ability to then communicate your problems, your issues that you're experiencing for yourself and for your loved one to the provider in such a way that the provider is able to then document that so that it works.
Well, yeah, and sometimes you have to tell them.
Yes.
You have to know the words.
Yes.
You have to know the words to say. And because you often get shortchanged because you're not helping the provider who, for whatever reason, again, healthcare is a profit-centered business in this country. It's just, who knows? I mean, there's definitely protocol that all professionals have to follow, but like the 14-day rehab thing, it's like, I just know so many people that get cut out from further rehab because they haven't advocated to the right people with the right words. Saying, I could keep improving. I could keep improving. And so I think that's a big part of recovering. But the biggest surprise in taking care of my mom was that as soon as we got out of the hospital, I come to see that we can't even get her doctor to come there. He's not allowed there. He's not allowed. Doesn't have the signed contract to come into that nursing home or rehab to see my mother. So, I had to find like all these new people that would come there.
So you have to reestablish care with a new team of professionals.
Yeah, because in a lot of cases, it's more than one specialist. I mean, in my mom's case, she needed a pulmonologist and a rheumatologist, endocrinologist. I mean, she had different conditions that needed monitoring, and she took medication for. So, and a cardiologist. But you can't always pick and choose where you wind up. But I think at a certain age, it's good to begin with the end in mind.
I had a question. It's I'm not sure if I asked you this earlier, but was she in close proximity to where you lived at the time? Your mom?
Not. It was. She was about 40 minutes away.
Within the same state?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you brought up a really good point about working with the end in mind. What does that mean for the listeners?
Well, I think that, again, you have to be realistic when taking care of a senior loved one. They're at a crisis point where you have to step in. You have to. And it looks like, if not this time, maybe next time will be it. I mean, that was what it was with my mother. She was fine. She recovered from that first fall.
Yes.
But then several years later, like 5-7 years later, she fell again and broke her pelvis in 2 places and never recovered. So I'm saying that if something happens, it's good to recognize that this is the start of a process. It could take a few years, but to start to reposition yourself and know what doctors go to what hospitals, who's affiliated where, so that if you have to make a choice, some people live in proximity to a couple different hospitals, some don't. But it's good to know where your doctor has approval to go into, and which ones. So you might want to choose to go to the hospitals that participate. Even like if you go straight to a rehab, some participate in the hospital system, some don't. And certainly different doctors go to different care centers. I just think that to the children's generation and even seniors that, like myself, or I'm only 71, but hey, 30 years ago, I was ready for the glue factory, but we're all living longer. But I think it's good to begin with the end in mind, in that where and how is it going to look like? What is it going to look like? The best care you could give to the person you love. What is that going to look like? And then work towards that goal. I mean, I knew, again, when my mother fell the second time and they were trying to make me put her in a rehab, she couldn't breathe. She had emphysema. Her heart was failing. Her kidneys were failing. They had to keep her basically on all these medicines and fluids, which were making her sick and nauseous and feeling lousy. And she just didn't want to go to a rehab and be taken off the pain medicine because she was in such agony. She broke her pelvis in 2 places. I had to fight with the hospitals to let her go to hospice. She was begging them.
Really?
And they really didn't want to let her go to hospice. And I had to speak with the president of Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, okay? I had to speak with the office of the president of the hospital because I was the doctor who had been, assigned to her was being so unreasonable. I got her pulmonologist to come in and write a statement about how that my mother was not going to be able to live without full-time oxygen tanks, and that it was likely her lungs were going to fail anyway. I mean, she was at one point like on 8 pounds of oxygen. It was just, she really had a hard time. And
wow.
They would not, I finally really, and I would sleep in the room with her because I was so afraid they were going to like discharge her when I wasn't there.
Okay.
And like send her to a nursing home or somewhere where she'd be like drooling in her oatmeal in agony, and she's begging to go to hospice.
And what was that experience like when she went to hospice?
Well, again, this is where I began with the end of mine. I was able to bring hospice to where she lived. By then, we had found a place in an assisted living that, because she had been living with me for 3 years, but her emphysema was so bad, and I lived in a house with stairs, and she couldn't really climb stairs. And so anyway, we were able to bring hospice into where she was living. So the nursing staff for the facility were people that she was familiar with, and the hospice nurse was just fabulous. What wonderful people.
How were you able to find the hospice care? Was it at an assisted living facility that she was at, or was she at a house?
It was from, well, here's the thing. When the parent or someone, it's when they're in the hospital.
Okay.
That's the moment where you, as the advocate, have the best access to what you can get for your loved one. You have access to Medicare supplies at that point that they can write an order for, because it's part of the discharge order of the hospital.
Okay.
And another doctor's going to it's going to be much more difficult for another doctor to just write that order as an outpatient. But as a discharge order, you can get a bed. You could get the commode. You could get a cane, a walker, all sorts of things that a person truly needs, but may not be. You could probably get a wheelchair. I don't know. We didn't need one. But if it's part of the discharge, I know my mom got a hospital bed, and I just got a hospital bed for a fellow I know who fell as a result of Parkinson's, and we got him a hospital bed as part of his discharge from the hospital. But we had to ask. Nobody offered, but we had to, so we asked and we got it. So when she was in the hospital and they're trying to discharge her to the rehab, I remembered something, and it served me well. And I said, I want to speak to the social worker. Okay. I want the social worker, and I want the head nurse. Those are the two people that need to become everyone's next best friend. Okay. Sometimes some hospitals have an office of the patient advocate. There's actually somebody called a patient advocate in just about every hospital. Okay. But you don't know that. But I had to find that out from a personal experience in 26, that I needed somebody to speak up for me, because I had a terrible infection from operation and was in a hospital for 30 days. But anyway, I learned that there's this person. So when my mother was being harassed to go into this rehab, I said, I want to see the social worker. I want to see the head nurse, because the head nurse scrutinizes all the reports that go in, the recommendations. It can also give me access to read what's been written about my loved one in these reports. I mean, as long as you have power medical attorney and you have the proper legal authorization to look at your loved one's HIPAA medical records, which I'm sure you'll talk to some lawyer and get good advice about. But you need like the social worker and the head nurse to then assure that you're going to be able to evaluate what's really going on and not just be told what's going on. And then it's through them that they arrange for hospice.
To walk me through this, did you already have the power of attorney and sort of so you had all that arranged?
Everyone, as soon as one of your parents passes away, you have to have to talk with the other parent, because up until then they're each other's power. Okay. In 99% of all cases, one parent is signed on as the other person's power of attorney, right?
Right.
So as soon as one passes, that's when the kids have to go to the survivor and say, hey, you got to name somebody. You got to get this straight. We got to get this all squared away, because God forbid the unexpected happens. And then who's supposed to speak up for you if it's not documented? What they don't give you automatics like you're the closest blood relative. No, it goes to the state to arbitrate.
Really?
Yes. If there's no power of attorney, if there's no medical power of attorney, there might be obvious situations, but legally, I know this because I just was at a lawyer with a friend of mine getting his affairs in order, and the lawyer really emphasized the fact that if you don't do this, people that want to help you may not be able to get the permission to help you on your behalf. So it's super duper important with your parents or older people, but even for like anyone who's got a legal partner, a husband or a wife, I think twice about having. I would really talk about like what's going to happen if something happens to one of us. Maybe you talk about it then, while you're both still alive. So when my dad passed, it was just so obvious because my mom didn't handle it that well. She needed me more. It was an obvious going to the lawyer and redoing the will and everything that they had as a couple.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that I would venture to say that people should really start this discussion before the medical situation gets worse, and then also it needs a revision. What I'm hearing, even if one couple passes away, or if there's a dramatic change in either their lives or their health.
But absolutely, and again, the alternative is that the power gets taken away temporarily till some judge decides, I guess, who could speak for this person. It's unless, again, if it's a spouse, it's almost automatic. It's not automatic when it comes to this speaking for somebody else.
Got it. If it's outside of that immediate either marriage or relationship,
no, even if it is. Oh,
really? Okay.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. No, if it's marriage, I believe they can automatically take a husband or wife. I'm not 100% sure. So you should cut that part out of your podcast. But I do know that if, like, let's say two of the children go to the hospital, the mother's passed, they're there for their father, and the two children have different opinions of what to do.
Got it.
Okay. Nobody at the hospital's going to send it to the state arbitrator.
Really? Okay.
That's the kind of situation, or like I said, with my mom, where she's wanted to go into hospice. They wanted to keep their numbers a certain way, I guess. I think it was financially motivated, but they wanted to send her out to the rehab.
Right.
So if I didn't have the proper power of medical attorney for her, maybe I couldn't have forced them to reconsider. I feel that was a huge bureaucratic stumbling block that I didn't have to encounter. I could fight for my mom's rights because I already had gone through the legal process with her.